You are about to spend the next few hours learning something that most people never learn in their entire lives, and that is how to make money keep coming to you even when you are not working. Right now, you probably wake up, go to a job, trade your time for a paycheck, and repeat this same cycle week after week. If you stop showing up, the money stops too. That is the trap most people live inside without ever questioning it. This book is going to show you a different way. Inside these pages, you will learn how to build things that pay you long after the work is done. You will learn how to build your first asset while still keeping your job. You will learn how to fix your money habits before trying to grow your wealth. You will learn how to create several income streams so one bad month cannot hurt you. You will learn how to turn what you already know into something people buy while you sleep. You will learn how small, steady investments turn into real wealth over time. You will learn how to push past fear and take action. You will learn how to set up systems that keep working without you. You will learn how to protect what you build and how to keep growing every single day until it adds up to something big. Stay with me through this book. Your future is waiting, and it starts with the very next page. Chapter 1. Discover the mindset shift that turns effort into lifelong income. There is a moment in every person's life when they realize that something is deeply wrong with the way they have been taught to think about money. It usually happens quietly. Maybe you are sitting at your desk on a Tuesday afternoon, watching the clock, counting down the hours until you can leave a job that pays you only for the time you give it. Maybe you are lying awake at night, doing math in your head, calculating how many more years you will need to work before you can finally breathe. Maybe you already sense that something about this arrangement is unsustainable, even if you cannot yet explain why. That feeling is not weakness, it is wisdom trying to surface. For most of human history, income and labor were bound together so tightly that people never thought to separate them. You worked, you got paid. You stopped working, you stopped getting paid. This was true for farmers, for laborers, for soldiers, and it remains true today for the vast majority of employees who trade 8, 10, sometimes 12 hours a day in exchange for a paycheck that vanishes the moment they stop showing up. This arrangement feels normal because everyone around you lives inside it. Your parents lived inside it. Your friends live inside it. The entire economy is built on the assumption that most people will spend their whole lives exchanging hours for dollars and then hope that whatever is left over after expenses will somehow be enough to retire on. But here is the truth that separates those who build lasting wealth from those who spend 40 years working hard and end up with very little to show for it. Income and labor do not have to be permanently linked. They can be separated. And the separation begins not with a new job, not with a lucky break, not with someone handing you an inheritance, but with a shift that takes place entirely inside your own mind. This is the first and most important lesson you will learn in this book. Before you build a single asset, before you invest a single dollar, before you create a single product, you must first change the way you see effort itself. Most people believe that effort is something you spend once and then it disappears. You work a shift, you get paid for that shift, and the value of your effort ends the moment the shift ends. This is what I call disposable effort. It buys you today, but it does nothing for tomorrow. It is the financial equivalent of eating a meal that gives you no nutrition, satisfying hunger for an hour, and then leaving you empty again. There is another kind of effort, and understanding the difference between the two will change the entire trajectory of your life. This is effort that compounds. Effort that compounds does not disappear after you spend it. It builds something. It creates a structure that continues to generate value long after the moment of effort has passed. When a person writes a book, the hours spent writing are effort. But once the book exists, it can sell copies for years, in some cases for the rest of that person's life and beyond. When someone builds a piece of software, the effort of coding is spent once, but the software can serve thousands of users without the coder having to redo that labor for each one. When a person plants an orchard, the labor of planting happens in a season, but the trees bear fruit for decades. This is the mindset shift. You must stop asking yourself, how can I work harder today to earn more today? Instead, you must start asking yourself, what can I build today that will still be paying me 5 years from now? This single question, asked consistently and acted upon with discipline, is the foundation of everything else in this book. I want you to sit with this idea honestly, because most people read something like this and nod along without truly absorbing it. They agree with the words, but their daily actions do not change. They go back to work the next day and continue exchanging hours for dollars exactly as before, telling themselves they will start building something later, when they have more time, more money, more energy. This delay is the quiet killer of financial freedom. It is not a lack of intelligence that keeps most people trapped in disposable effort. It is a lack of decision. Somewhere inside you, a decision has to be made that you are no longer willing to spend your entire life on effort that vanishes. That decision is not comfortable. It requires you to look honestly at how you currently spend your time and admit that much of it produces nothing lasting. Discipline, in the truest sense, is not about punishing yourself or working harder out of guilt. Discipline is about aligning your daily actions with the future you actually want, even when that future feels distant and uncertain. The person who wakes up an hour earlier to write, to learn a new skill, to build the early version of a product, is not doing something glamorous. Nobody is watching. Nobody is applauding. There is no immediate reward. This is precisely why so few people do it. Anyone can work hard for a reward that arrives the same day. It takes a different kind of strength to work quietly for a reward that might not arrive for months or years, built on nothing but the trust that compounding effort eventually pays off. Think about what it actually means to build an asset. An asset, in the simplest terms, is anything that continues to produce value for you without requiring your constant presence. This could be a skill you have turned into a course that people buy long after you recorded it. It could be a small rental property that brings in money every month whether or not you personally show up to manage it that day. It could be a piece of writing, a piece of code, a system you designed, a relationship of trust you built with an audience or a customer base. The form matters less than the function. What all assets share is this quality. They keep paying you after the initial effort has been completed. Compare this to the story of two people starting from the exact same position. Both work the same job, earn the same salary, and have the same number of hours in their day. The first person spends every evening resting in front of the television, scrolling through their phone, or filling their time with entertainment that consumes attention and gives nothing back. There is nothing wrong with rest, but rest without direction becomes a slow erosion of potential. The second person, after finishing their job, spends even just 1 hour a day working on something that belongs entirely to them. Maybe they are writing articles that will one day become a course. Maybe they are learning to design so they can create digital products. Maybe they are saving small amounts and learning how to invest them wisely. On any single day, the difference between these two people looks invisible. Nobody would notice. But run this forward 5 years, and the gap between them becomes enormous. One person has built something. The other person has the same job, the same paycheck, the same dependency they had 5 years earlier, only now 5 years older. This is not a story meant to make you feel guilt about how you have spent your time so far. Guilt is useless. It looks backward and produces nothing. What matters is the decision you make starting today. The past cannot be changed, but the next 5 years of your life have not been written yet, and how you choose to spend your hours from this point forward will determine whether you are still trading time for money a decade from now, or whether you have built assets that continue paying you regardless of whether you show up. Let me give you something practical to hold on to, because wisdom without action is just entertainment. The first step in making this mindset shift real is to conduct an honest audit of your time. For 7 days, write down how you actually spend your hours outside of work and sleep. Do not judge yourself while doing this. Simply observe. At the end of the week, look at the list and ask one question about each activity. Does this produce anything that will still exist next month, or does it disappear the moment it ends? Be honest. Entertainment disappears. Scrolling disappears. Even socializing, while valuable for the soul, often produces nothing that compounds financially. This audit will show you exactly how much raw material you have available to redirect toward building assets. The second step is to choose one single asset to begin building, and to resist the temptation to start 5 things at once. Most people fail not because they lack ideas, but because they scatter their effort across too many projects, finishing none of them. Choose the one skill, product, or investment vehicle that aligns most closely with what you already know or what you can learn quickly, and commit to it for a minimum of 90 days before evaluating whether to continue or pivot. 90 days is long enough to build real momentum and short enough to keep you honest about your commitment. The third step is to protect a specific block of time each day, no matter how small, and treat it as non-negotiable. This does not need to be hours. Even 30 minutes a day, done consistently for a year, produces more than most people accomplish in 5 years of scattered, inconsistent effort. The compounding nature of assets applies just as much to the effort building them as it does to the assets themselves. Small, consistent deposits of time, made daily, become an enormous reserve of built value over time. The fourth step is to track your progress, not by how much money you have made yet, but by how much closer your asset is to functioning without you. This is the true measure of whether you are building something real. If your course is still requiring you to answer every question personally, it is not yet an asset, it is still labor. If your rental property still requires you to fix everything yourself, it is not yet an asset, it is still a second job. The goal is not simply to create something, but to create something that eventually requires less and less of your direct involvement while continuing to produce value. There is a Stoic principle worth remembering here, one that ancient philosophers understood long before modern economics gave us words like passive income and financial freedom. The principle is this: focus entirely on what is within your control and release your attachment to outcomes you cannot control. You cannot control how quickly the market will respond to what you build. You cannot control whether your first attempt succeeds. You cannot control how long it takes for compounding to show visible results. What you can control is whether you show up today and do the work required to build something lasting. This is where your energy belongs. Worrying about outcomes you cannot control drains energy that should be spent on the actions you can control. This mindset shift is not comfortable, and I will not pretend it is easy. It requires you to give up the instant gratification of spending every free hour on entertainment or rest, and instead invest that time into something whose reward you may not see for months. It requires patience in an age that worships speed. It requires faith in compounding when everything around you promises instant results. But this is precisely why so few people ever build lasting wealth. The path is not hidden. It is simply uncomfortable enough that most people turn away from it. You are reading this book because some part of you already senses that trading your entire life for a paycheck is not the future you want. That instinct is correct. Trust it. The mindset shift begins the moment you stop asking how you can earn more today and start asking what you can build today that will still be paying you 5 years from now. Every chapter that follows in this book will give you specific tools to answer that question, whether through building your first asset while still employed, mastering your money habits, creating multiple income streams, or learning to invest wisely and protect what you have built. But none of those tools will matter if this first shift does not take root in your mind. So before you turn the page, make the decision now. Decide that from today forward, some portion of your effort will go toward building something that outlives the moment it was created. Decide that you are done spending your entire life on effort that disappears the instant you stop. This decision, made quietly and acted upon daily, is the true beginning of the infinite income formula, and it starts with nothing more than a shift in how you see your own effort and what you choose to do with it starting today. Chapter 2. Build your first asset while you still have a job. Your job is not your enemy. I want to start there, because so many people who dream of building something of their own begin by resenting the very thing that currently pays their bills. They sit at their desk, they scroll through stories of people who quit everything and became wildly successful overnight, and they start to see their job as a cage. This resentment is a mistake, and it will slow you down rather than speed you up. Your job right now is not the enemy of your future. It is the resource that funds it. It is the stable ground you stand on while you learn to build something new. Every dollar it pays you, every skill it teaches you, every ounce of structure it gives your day can be redirected to serve the asset you are about to build. The goal is not to hate your job. The goal is to use it wisely while it still serves you and to build something alongside it that will eventually give you choices your job never could. There is a dangerous myth that says you must quit everything and take a massive risk to succeed. This myth has ruined more lives than it has built. It sounds brave in a story, but in reality, most people who leap without a foundation land in financial ruin, not freedom. The wiser path, the one walked by people who actually build lasting wealth, is far less dramatic. It looks like waking up an hour earlier than usual. It looks like giving up 30 minutes of scrolling at night to write, plan, or create. It looks like using your lunch break to research a market instead of watching videos to pass the time. This is not a glamorous story. Nobody will admire you for it in the moment. But this quiet, unremarkable discipline is exactly how real assets get built, brick by brick, while a paycheck still covers your rent. Understand something clearly. The purpose of your job during this season of your life is not just income, it is cover. It gives you the freedom to experiment without desperation. When someone quits their job first and then tries to build an asset, they carry an invisible weight on every decision. They need the thing to work immediately because their survival depends on it. That pressure destroys creativity and clear thinking. Desperation makes people take shortcuts, chase trends, instead of building something solid, and quit at the first sign of difficulty because they cannot afford to wait. But when your job is still paying your bills, you can experiment patiently. You can fail at a small version of an idea, learn from it, and try again without your family going hungry. This patience is a luxury that only a stable paycheck can buy you, so use it while you have it. Now let us talk about what building an asset while employed actually looks like in practice, because vague inspiration does nothing without a clear method. The first thing you must do is separate your identity from your job title. Many people introduce themselves purely by what they do for their employer, and this becomes a mental trap. If you only see yourself as an employee, you will unconsciously limit your effort to the tasks your employer assigns you. But if you see your job as one part of a larger life you are constructing, you begin to notice opportunities your co-workers walk past every single day. The accountant who studies real estate on weekends. The nurse who learns to build simple websites for local businesses in the evening. The warehouse worker who studies photography and begins selling prints online. None of these people had extra time handed to them. They simply refused to let their job title define the outer limit of what they were capable of building. The next step is choosing your first asset wisely, and this decision matters more than people realize. Do not choose based on what looks impressive to others. Choose based on two questions. First, what skill or knowledge do you already have that other people would pay for? Second, what can you realistically work on for 30 to 60 minutes a day without needing expensive equipment or large amounts of capital you do not yet have? The beauty of building your first asset today, compared to decades ago, is that the barrier to entry has dropped dramatically. You do not need a factory to sell a product. You do not need a publisher to release a book. You do not need a storefront to reach customers. A laptop, a phone, and consistent effort are enough to begin building something real. Once you have chosen your direction, protect your time like it is sacred, because it is. This means having an honest conversation with yourself about what currently fills your evenings and weekends. Perhaps it is unnecessary meetings with friends who drain your energy. Perhaps it is hours spent watching shows that entertain you but leave nothing behind once they end. You are not being asked to eliminate rest or connection completely, because burnout will destroy your progress just as surely as laziness will. You are being asked to trade some of the empty hours, the ones that currently disappear without a trace, for hours spent building something that will still exist next year. Consistency matters more than intensity here. A person who works on their asset for 30 minutes every single day for a year will outperform someone who works for 5 hours on a Saturday and then does nothing for 2 weeks. The daily habit trains your mind to treat this project as real, as something worthy of your consistent attention, rather than a hobby you pick up occasionally when you feel inspired. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes based on your mood, your energy, and your circumstances. Discipline, the simple act of showing up whether you feel like it or not, is what actually finishes projects and builds assets that last. You should also expect this season to be tiring, because you are essentially doing 2 jobs at once for a period of time. This is the cost of building something without giving up your financial safety net, and it is a fair trade. Nobody builds lasting wealth without paying some price in effort, time, or risk. The people who build their first asset while still employed are choosing to pay in effort and time rather than risk, which is often the wiser trade for someone without significant savings. Protect your sleep, protect your health, and pace yourself for a marathon rather than a sprint, because burning out in month 2 will accomplish nothing. There will come a point, if you stay consistent, where your asset begins producing enough that you must make a decision about your job. That decision should never be rushed. Let the numbers guide you rather than your emotions. When your asset consistently produces income that gives you real options, you will know it, because the decision to leave your job will start to feel less like a risk and more like a natural next step. Until that day arrives, treat your current job with respect. It is quietly funding the future you are building in the hours nobody else sees, and every asset you create while still employed is proof that you do not need permission, luck, or a dramatic leap to start becoming the person who owns their time instead of renting it out 1 hour at a time. Chapter 3. Master your money habits before you try to grow wealth. There is an uncomfortable truth that most people avoid facing, and it is this: giving someone more money without changing their habits will not make them wealthy. It will simply give them a bigger mess. I have watched people receive raises, bonuses, inheritances, and windfalls, only to find themselves broke again within a few years, sometimes within months. This is not bad luck. It is the direct result of habits that were never fixed before the money arrived. If your relationship with money is built on impulse, avoidance, or confusion, then growth will only amplify the damage. This is why mastering your habits must come before any serious attempt to grow wealth. Wealth poured into a leaking container simply drains away faster. Most people never actually look at where their money goes. They feel a vague sense of never having enough, but they cannot tell you specifically why. This vagueness is the enemy. You cannot fix what you refuse to measure. The first habit you must build is simple honesty with your own numbers. For 1 full month, track every single expense, no matter how small. Not an estimate, not a rough guess, but the real amount spent on coffee, subscriptions, takeout, impulse purchases, and everything else. Most people who do this exercise honestly are shocked by what they find. Small leaks, repeated daily, drain far more than people realize, and you cannot patch a leak you have never bothered to locate. Once you can see your numbers clearly, the next habit is learning to separate needs from wants without shame or judgment. This is not about punishing yourself for enjoying your life. It is about being conscious rather than unconscious with your spending. A want is not evil. Spending on things you value is part of a full life. The danger is not wanting things, it is spending without awareness, letting money leave your hands through habit rather than choice. When you buy something consciously, having decided in advance that it fits your values and your plan, you feel satisfaction. When you buy something unconsciously, out of boredom, stress, or habit, you often feel a strange emptiness afterward, even if the purchase itself was small. Learn to notice that emptiness. It is your signal that a habit, not a decision, made that purchase for you. The next principle worth understanding deeply is this. Your income is not the true measure of your financial health. Your gap is. The gap is the space between what you earn and what you spend. A person earning a modest income who keeps a healthy gap every month will build wealth steadily over time. A person earning a large income who spends everything, or worse, spends more than they earn, will remain financially fragile no matter how impressive their salary looks on paper. This is why raises alone rarely solve financial stress. When income rises without any change in spending habits, expenses simply rise to match it, and the person ends up in the exact same position as before, just with a more expensive lifestyle to maintain. Widening the gap, not just increasing the income, is what actually builds wealth. To widen this gap, you need a system, because willpower alone will fail you eventually. Willpower is a limited resource that weakens under stress, fatigue, and temptation. Systems do not get tired. The simplest and most effective system is to pay yourself first. This means that the moment income arrives, before a single bill is paid or a single want is satisfied, a fixed percentage is set aside for savings or investment. It does not need to be large at first. Even 5 or 10%, moved automatically so you never see it as available spending money, builds a habit that compounds over time. Most people do the opposite. They pay every other expense first and save whatever happens to be left over, which is usually nothing. Reverse this order, and you reverse your entire financial trajectory. Debt deserves special attention here, because debt habits, more than almost anything else, determine whether wealth building is even possible. Not all debt is equal, and painting all debt with the same brush is a mistake. Debt taken to build an asset, such as a reasonable loan for education that increases your earning capacity, or financing for equipment that helps you produce income, can be a tool. But debt taken to fund a lifestyle you cannot yet afford, accumulated through impulsive spending on things that lose value the moment you acquire them, is a trap that quietly steals your future earnings before you have even made them. If you are currently carrying this kind of debt, mastering your money habits means confronting it directly, rather than avoiding the statements or pretending the balance will fix itself. Choose a method, whether it is paying off the smallest balance first for the emotional momentum it creates, or paying off the highest interest rate first for the mathematical efficiency, and commit to it with the same discipline you would apply to building any other asset. Another habit that separates those who build lasting wealth from those who do not is patience with delayed gratification. We live in a world that constantly offers immediate rewards, and resisting them has become one of the rarest skills a person can develop. Every advertisement, every notification, every one-click purchase is designed to shorten the distance between desire and satisfaction. Mastering your money habits means deliberately lengthening that distance again. When you want something that is not part of your plan, wait. Give yourself a real waiting period, whether it is 24 hours for a small purchase or 30 days for a large one. Often the desire fades entirely once the initial impulse passes. When it does not fade, and you still want the item after genuine reflection, you can buy it with a clear conscience, knowing it was a choice rather than a reaction. You must also build the habit of reviewing your finances regularly, rather than avoiding them out of anxiety. Many people check their bank balance only when they are afraid, glancing quickly and then closing the app just as fast, as if not looking will somehow protect them from bad news. This avoidance keeps you disconnected from your own situation and prevents you from catching small problems before they grow large. Set aside time each week, even just 10 minutes, to look honestly at your accounts, your spending, and your progress toward your savings goals. This regular contact removes the fear that avoidance creates, because familiarity replaces anxiety with clarity. None of these habits are exciting. There is no thrill in tracking expenses, no glamour in automatic savings transfers, no adrenaline in waiting a month before making a purchase. But this is precisely the point. Wealth is rarely built through excitement. It is built through unremarkable, repeated discipline that nobody sees and nobody applauds. The habits you build now, quietly and consistently, are what will determine whether the income you generate from your future assets becomes lasting wealth or simply disappears as quickly as it arrives. Master these habits first, and every dollar you earn from this point forward will finally have somewhere solid to stand. Chapter 4. Create multiple income streams to protect your future today. Imagine a table that stands on a single leg. It might hold weight for a while if everything stays perfectly still, but the smallest disturbance, a slight lean, an unexpected bump, sends the whole thing crashing down. This is exactly what a single income source does to your life. Most people build their entire financial existence on one leg, one job, one employer, one paycheck, and they call this stability, when in truth, it is one of the most fragile arrangements a person can depend on. A single email from human resources, a single shift in the economy, a single decision made by someone else in a boardroom you will never enter, and that one leg can disappear entirely. This is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to wake you up to a reality that most people only discover after it is too late to prepare. A table with 4 legs can lose one and still stand. This is the entire philosophy behind building multiple income streams. It is not about greed, and it is not about chasing every opportunity that promises quick riches. It is about survival and security in a world that offers no guarantees to anyone, no matter how loyal or hardworking they are. When you depend entirely on one source of income, you have quietly handed control of your life to forces outside your control. When you build several sources, even small ones, you take a portion of that control back into your own hands. This is the true meaning of financial protection, and it has very little to do with how much money you currently have. There is a common misunderstanding that multiple income streams means working multiple jobs, exhausting yourself across several employers with no time left to breathe. This is not what we are building here. Trading hours for dollars at one job and then trading more hours for dollars at a second job simply doubles your exhaustion without doubling your freedom, because both streams still disappear the moment you stop showing up. The kind of income streams that actually protect your future are the ones that do not require your constant, direct labor to continue producing. This is the crucial distinction that separates genuine financial security from mere busyness. Let us break this down into categories you can actually use, because vague encouragement to diversify means nothing without a clear starting point. The first category is earned income, which is what most people already have through their primary job. This remains the foundation for most people during the early years of building wealth, because it provides the stability and capital needed to fund everything else. The second category is business income, which comes from something you have created or operate, whether it is a small service you offer on the side, a shop you run online, or a skill you sell directly to clients beyond your main employment. The third category is investment income, which comes from money that has been placed into vehicles like stocks, bonds, or retirement accounts that grow and pay returns over time. The fourth category is asset income, which includes rental income from property, royalties from something you created once and continue to sell, or licensing income from work you produced in the past. Understanding these categories helps you see that diversifying does not mean scattering yourself thin. It means intentionally building income that flows from different sources so that no single disruption can take everything from you at once. The starting point for most people should be small and deliberate, rather than large and overwhelming. Choose one additional stream beyond your primary income and give it your full attention, rather than attempting to launch 5 different projects simultaneously, which almost always results in none of them reaching a level of quality that customers or markets will pay for. If you already have savings, even a modest amount, opening a simple investment account and contributing to it consistently each month creates your second stream without demanding significant time from your schedule. If you have a skill that others need, offering that skill as a service to a small number of clients outside your main job creates a second stream that uses time you already have available in evenings or weekends. The specific choice matters less than the decision to begin, because momentum, once started, tends to build on itself in ways that pure planning never can. One principle that deserves special attention is the difference between active additional income and passive additional income, and why you should aim to shift gradually from the former to the latter. Active additional income, such as freelancing or consulting on the side, is valuable because it can start quickly and requires little upfront capital. However, it still consumes your time directly, meaning it carries some of the same fragility as your primary job, just in smaller form. Passive additional income, such as dividends from investments, royalties from digital products, or profit from a business that runs with systems rather than your constant presence, is what ultimately provides the deepest protection because it continues even during illness, during periods of low motivation, or during unexpected life events that would otherwise halt an active income source entirely. The wise approach is to use active income streams as a bridge, allowing them to fund and support the slower construction of passive streams that will eventually carry more of the weight. Timing also matters more than people realize. The best moment to build additional income streams is not when you desperately need them, but well before that need arrives. Waiting until a crisis forces your hand puts you in the same desperate position discussed in earlier chapters, where fear and urgency lead to poor decisions and rushed choices that rarely produce quality results. Building these streams during a season of relative stability, even when everything currently feels fine, is what separates people who weather storms comfortably from those who are caught completely unprepared when circumstances change without warning. There is also a psychological benefit to multiple income streams that goes beyond the financial numbers themselves, and it deserves honest acknowledgement. When your entire sense of security rests on one employer's continued goodwill, you often make decisions from a place of quiet fear, even if you do not consciously recognize it. You may tolerate situations you should not tolerate, stay silent when you should speak, or avoid pursuing better opportunities because the risk feels too large to bear alone. When you have built even one additional stream of income, however modest, something shifts internally. You begin making decisions from a place of genuine choice rather than fear, because you know that losing one source will not mean losing everything. This shift in your internal state often leads to better decisions across every area of your life, not just your finances. Begin where you are, with what you already have, and resist the urge to compare your starting point to someone else's fifth or sixth income stream that took years to build. Every stream you now depend on started as a single small effort made consistently over time. The table with 4 sturdy legs was once built one leg at a time, and yours will be no different. Choose your second stream now. Commit to it with the same patience you have applied to everything else in this journey, and let it grow steadily until the day comes when losing any single source of income no longer threatens the life you have carefully built for yourself. Chapter 5. Turn your skills into products that sell while you sleep. Somewhere inside you right now is knowledge that took years to gather, and most of it is currently trapped, locked away, only accessible through your direct personal presence. You know how to solve a problem that others struggle with. You have learned lessons through hard experience that someone else would gladly pay to learn in a fraction of the time. Yet if that knowledge only ever leaves your mind through one-on-one conversations, one client at a time, 1 hour at a time, it remains chained to your physical presence and your limited hours in a day. This chapter is about breaking that chain. It is about taking what already lives inside your head and transforming it into something that can be sold to one person or 1,000 people without requiring you to be present for each individual transaction. Understand clearly what a product actually is in this context, because the word often creates confusion. A product is not necessarily something physical sitting on a shelf. A product, for our purposes, is any packaged version of your knowledge or skill that can be delivered to a buyer without your direct involvement in each sale. A written guide that answers a specific problem is a product. A recorded course that teaches a skill step by step is a product. A template that saves someone hours of work is a product. A tool or piece of software that automates something tedious is a product. The common thread running through every example is this: the effort of creation happens once, but the ability to sell happens repeatedly, potentially for years, without requiring that same effort to be repeated for every single customer. Compare this to the trap most skilled people fall into, which is selling their time directly through services. A consultant who charges by the hour, a coach who only works with clients live, a designer who takes on projects one at a time. All of these people are skilled, valuable, and hard-working, yet their income remains capped by the number of hours available in a day. No matter how much they raise their rates, there is a ceiling, because a day only contains so many hours, and a body only has so much energy before exhaustion sets in. This is not a failure of effort. It is simply the mathematical reality of trading time directly for money. The shift toward products removes this ceiling entirely, because a course can be purchased by one person or 1,000 people in the exact same day without you spending a single additional hour on delivery once it exists. The first step in this transformation is identifying the specific knowledge inside you that solves a real problem for a specific group of people. Vague knowledge does not sell well. General advice that could apply to anyone rarely captures anyone's full attention or their wallet. Specific knowledge that solves a specific frustration for a specific type of person sells far more easily. Instead of creating something about improving productivity in general, a course that teaches busy parents how to organize their mornings in 15 minutes solves a specific problem for a specific person. Instead of a generic guide about cooking, a collection of quick meals designed specifically for people working night shifts speaks directly to a real, felt need. The narrower and more specific your focus, the more powerfully it will resonate with the exact people who need it most. Once you have identified this knowledge, resist the temptation to make your first product perfect before releasing it. This is where countless promising products die quietly, trapped forever in someone's private files, because the creator kept polishing, kept adding, kept delaying the moment of release, out of fear that it was not yet good enough. Your first version does not need to be perfect. It needs to be genuinely useful and honestly represented to the people who buy it. Real feedback from real customers will teach you more about how to improve your product in 1 month than another year of private planning ever could. Release something solid, listen carefully to how people respond, and improve the next version based on what you learn from actual buyers rather than your own untested assumptions. The format of your product matters less than most people assume, and choosing the simplest format available to you right now is almost always the wisest decision. If writing comes naturally to you, a written guide delivered as a simple document requires no special equipment beyond what you already own. If speaking comes naturally to you, a recorded series of short lessons using nothing more than your phone camera and a quiet room is entirely sufficient to begin. Do not let the pursuit of professional equipment, elaborate editing, or perfect production quality delay you from releasing something that already has real value inside it. Customers care far more about whether your product genuinely solves their problem than whether the video was filmed with expensive lighting. Pricing your product correctly requires courage, because most people who are new to this severely undervalue what they have created. There is a quiet fear that says nobody would pay real money for something you know so well that it feels almost too simple to charge for. This fear is misleading. The very fact that something feels simple and obvious to you is often precisely why it holds enormous value to someone who does not yet possess that knowledge. What feels basic after years of experience can feel like a breakthrough to someone standing at the very beginning of that same journey. Price your product based on the value it delivers to the buyer, the time it saves them, the frustration it removes from their life, rather than pricing it based on how many hours it took you personally to create it. Building an audience willing to buy from you does not require fame or a massive following overnight. It requires consistency in showing up somewhere, whether that is a small social media presence, a simple email list, or a community built around a shared interest, and consistently offering genuine value before ever asking for a sale. Trust is built through repeated, reliable helpfulness over time, not through a single clever piece of marketing. People buy from those they trust, and trust is earned slowly, through showing up honestly again and again, long before any transaction occurs. Once your product exists and begins generating sales, your role shifts from creator to maintainer, and this shift is where the true freedom of this chapter's promise begins to reveal itself. You will spend time answering occasional questions, perhaps updating content periodically to keep it relevant, and continuing to build trust with your audience. But the core labor of creation does not need to be repeated for each new customer who purchases. A person on the opposite side of the world can buy your course or guide while you are asleep, during hours you spent resting rather than working, and this transaction requires nothing further from you beyond the system you built once, weeks or months earlier. This is the quiet magic hidden inside packaged knowledge. The effort front loads itself into a defined period of focused creation, and the reward extends far beyond that period, sometimes for years, sometimes even decades if the knowledge remains relevant and you maintain it with care. What you know right now, the lessons learned through your own struggles and successes, deserves to exist in a form that can reach far more people than your direct presence ever could. Begin the process of packaging it today, however imperfectly, and let the world discover the value you have been carrying quietly inside you all along. Chapter 6. Invest small amounts consistently to build massive long-term wealth. There is a story about a king who was so pleased with a game invented for him that he offered its creator anything he wished as a reward. The creator asked for something that sounded almost embarrassingly modest. He asked for 1 grain of rice on the first square of the game board, 2 grains on the second square, 4 on the third, the amount doubling with each square across all 64 squares. The king laughed at how small this request seemed, and agreed immediately, believing he was getting away with paying almost nothing. Yet by the time the calculation reached the final squares, the total amount of rice exceeded anything the kingdom could produce in many lifetimes. This is the story of compounding, and it is the exact principle that turns small, consistent investments into massive long-term wealth, even though the early numbers look almost insultingly small. Most people dismiss small investments because the early results feel meaningless. Putting aside a modest amount each month, watching it grow by only a few dollars in the first year, feels like barely moving at all compared to the wealth they imagine for their future. This discouragement causes many people to quit before compounding has had enough time to reveal its true power. Compounding does not work like a straight line that grows steadily and predictably. It works more like the rice on that chessboard, remaining deceptively small and unremarkable for a long stretch of time before suddenly accelerating into numbers that feel almost unbelievable. The tragedy is that most people give up during the unremarkable early stretch, right before the acceleration would have begun to show itself clearly. Understanding why time matters more than the amount you invest is essential here, because this single insight will free you from the false belief that you need to be wealthy already before you can start investing. Consider 2 people. The first begins investing a modest amount every month starting in their 20s and continues steadily for 10 years, then stops adding new money entirely but leaves what they have invested untouched. The second person waits until their 30s, feeling they need to first save more before starting, and then invests a larger amount every month for 20 straight years. When both reach retirement age, the first person, despite investing for a much shorter period and contributing far less money overall, often ends up with more wealth than the second person, simply because their money had more years to compound. This is not a trick of clever mathematics designed to sound impressive. It is the honest, provable reality of how compounding works, and it should change how urgently you feel about starting today, rather than waiting for a better moment that may never arrive. The reason consistency matters more than the size of each individual contribution comes down to a simple truth about markets and growth. Nobody, no matter how skilled or experienced, can reliably predict which specific month or year will produce the best returns. Some months will show growth, some will show decline, and this unpredictability is simply the nature of any investment that has the potential for meaningful long-term growth. When you invest consistently, regardless of whether the market feels favorable or unfavorable in that particular month, you naturally buy more when prices are low and less when prices are high, without needing to predict anything at all. This approach removes the paralyzing pressure of trying to time your investments perfectly, a pressure that causes many people to freeze entirely and invest nothing while they wait for conditions that feel certain, conditions that in truth never actually arrive. Let us address the fear that stops most people before they even begin, which is the belief that investing requires large amounts of money to be worthwhile. This belief keeps people waiting for a future moment when they finally have enough saved up to start seriously, and that moment, disguised as responsible patience, often never comes because expenses always seem to rise just as quickly as income does. The truth is that starting with a small, consistent amount, even an amount that feels almost too small to matter, builds two things simultaneously that are equally valuable. It builds the actual financial growth through compounding, and it builds the habit and confidence of being an investor, someone who takes consistent action rather than someone who waits indefinitely for perfect conditions. This second benefit is easy to overlook, yet it often determines whether someone continues investing at all once life becomes busy or stressful. Practical action matters more here than theory, so let us discuss exactly how to begin. The first step is automating your contributions so that the decision to invest is made once and then repeats itself without requiring willpower every single month. When investing depends on remembering to manually transfer money and then choosing not to spend it on something else instead, most people eventually skip a month, then another, until the habit quietly dissolves. When the transfer happens automatically on a set date each month, the habit protects itself from the inconsistency of human motivation, which naturally rises and falls depending on mood, stress, and daily distractions. The second practical step is choosing simplicity over complexity, especially in the early years of building this habit. Many people delay investing because they feel overwhelmed by the sheer number of options available, uncertain which specific investment to choose, paralyzed by the fear of choosing incorrectly. While understanding your options deeply over time is valuable, broad, diversified investment options that spread your money across many different companies or assets, rather than concentrating it in one single choice, offer a reasonable starting point for most beginners. This approach reduces the risk that comes from putting all your money into one company or one narrow sector, while still allowing you to participate in the overall growth of the wider economy over time. The third practical step, and perhaps the most emotionally difficult one, is committing to leave your investments alone during periods when the value drops, rather than panicking and withdrawing everything at the first sign of decline. Markets move up and down constantly, and periods of decline, sometimes sharp and frightening ones, are a normal and expected part of long-term investing, rather than a sign that something has gone wrong. The investors who build lasting wealth are rarely the ones who guessed correctly about every market movement. They are simply the ones who stayed consistent through the uncomfortable periods, trusting the process rather than reacting emotionally to short-term fear. Think again about that story of the rice on the chessboard. The first half of the board produced numbers so small they seemed almost pointless, barely worth a king's attention at all. Yet the second half of that same board, built entirely on the same simple pattern of doubling that had existed from the very first square, produced results that reshaped everything. Your investments will follow this same quiet pattern. The early years will feel unremarkable, the numbers modest enough that you may wonder whether any of this is truly working. Resist the urge to judge the process by its early appearance. Stay consistent. Protect your habit through automation. Choose simplicity over paralysis, and remain calm during the inevitable periods of decline. The results, much like that legendary chessboard, will eventually reveal themselves in ways that the early years could never have predicted, rewarding the patience of those who kept investing quietly and consistently long after it stopped feeling exciting. Chapter 7. Overcome fear and take bold action toward financial freedom. Fear rarely announces itself honestly. It almost never appears in your mind as a simple thought that says, "I am afraid to try this." Instead, it disguises itself as reasonable caution. It sounds like a voice telling you that you need more research before you begin, more savings before you invest, more certainty before you act. It sounds responsible, even wise, which is exactly why it is so effective at keeping people stuck for years, sometimes for entire lifetimes. Fear wears the mask of practicality so convincingly that most people never realize they are being controlled by it. Recognizing this disguise is the first step toward breaking its hold over your financial decisions. Consider how fear typically operates in the mind of someone standing at the edge of a decision that could change their financial future. They have an idea for a product, a plan to invest, a chance to leave a job that no longer serves their growth, yet before any action is taken, the mind begins generating a long list of everything that could go wrong. What if nobody buys it? What if the market crashes right after I invest? What if I fail publicly and everyone sees? These questions feel like careful thinking, but notice that they all point in the same direction, toward inaction, toward staying exactly where you already are. Genuine careful thinking considers both what could go wrong and what could go right, and then makes a reasoned decision. Fear only ever shows you one side of that equation, and it shows it to you in vivid, exaggerated detail while conveniently ignoring the cost of doing nothing at all. This is perhaps the most overlooked truth about fear and financial growth. Staying still is not actually safe, even though it feels safe in the moment. Every year spent avoiding a reasonable financial risk is a year where inflation quietly reduces the value of money sitting idle, a year where compounding growth that could have started simply did not, a year where the skills and confidence that come only from actually trying something remain undeveloped. The person who never invests because they fear losing money is guaranteed to lose value slowly to inflation regardless. They have simply chosen a slower, quieter loss over a faster, more visible risk. The person who never starts the business or product they have dreamed about for years has guaranteed themselves the exact outcome they feared, earning nothing from that idea, simply by choosing not to attempt it at all. Inaction feels safer only because its costs are invisible and delayed, while the costs of action, if things go poorly, feel immediate and visible. Both paths carry risk. Only one of them carries any possibility of reward. Bold action does not mean reckless action, and this distinction matters enormously. Recklessness ignores information and rushes forward blindly, often driven by impatience or ego rather than genuine readiness. Boldness, by contrast, gathers reasonable information, accepts that certainty will never fully arrive, and moves forward anyway, because it understands that waiting for complete certainty is itself a decision, and usually the wrong one. The Stoic philosophers understood this distinction well. They taught that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act rightly, despite its presence. You will likely never feel completely ready to invest, to launch your product, to leave a job that has grown too small for who you are becoming. Readiness is largely a myth, invented by the mind to justify further delay. Those who wait for readiness before acting typically wait forever, because the feeling of being fully prepared tends to arrive only after the action has already been taken, not before. Let us examine practically how fear manifests specifically around money, because generic courage means little without applying it directly to financial decisions. Fear of investing often stems from stories, usually second-hand, about someone who lost everything in a market downturn. These stories are real and worth understanding, but they are frequently incomplete, often involving concentrated bets on a single risky asset rather than a diversified, patient approach built over years. Fear of starting a side income stream often stems from a fear of visible failure, worrying about what family or friends might think if the attempt does not succeed publicly. Fear of leaving a stable job often stems from an inflated sense of the safety that job actually provides, forgetting that stability can be removed by an employer at any time, regardless of how safely you have played it. Naming your specific fear precisely, rather than allowing it to remain a vague cloud of anxiety, is often enough to reduce its power considerably. Vague fear feels enormous and unmanageable. Specific fear, once named clearly, can usually be examined, measured, and addressed with concrete steps. One of the most effective practical tools against fear is asking yourself a very specific question before making any significant financial decision. What is the worst realistic outcome? Not the worst imaginable outcome, but the worst outcome that could realistically happen, and could I survive it? Notice the difference between realistic and imaginable. The imaginable worst case for investing a modest, reasonable amount into a diversified fund is losing everything and ending up destitute. Yet this scenario is almost never realistic, given proper diversification and time. The realistic worst case is a temporary decline that recovers over years, an outcome that is uncomfortable but entirely survivable for someone who has not gambled money they cannot afford to lose. When you force your mind to consider the realistic worst case, rather than the exaggerated imaginable one, most financial fears shrink down to a size that becomes manageable rather than paralyzing. Another practical approach is taking bold action in smaller, more manageable steps, rather than requiring yourself to leap entirely at once. You do not need to invest your entire savings on the first day to begin building the habit of investing. You do not need to quit your job the same week you launch your first product to begin testing whether that product has real potential. Bold action can be broken into a series of smaller bold actions, each one building confidence and evidence for the next. The person who invests a small, comfortable amount consistently for a year gathers real experience with market movements, real evidence of how compounding behaves, and real confidence that was entirely absent before they began. This accumulated evidence becomes the foundation for larger, bold actions later, actions that would have felt impossibly frightening without this earlier groundwork. Understand also that regret operates on a different timeline than fear, and this distinction deserves serious reflection. Fear speaks loudly in the present moment, warning you urgently against taking action right now. Regret speaks quietly but persistently over years and even decades, whispering about the opportunities that were available and were not taken. Most people who reflect honestly on their financial lives regret the chances they did not take far more than the mistakes they made while genuinely trying. A failed attempt at building a product teaches valuable lessons and can be tried again in a different form. A chance never taken at all teaches nothing and cannot be revisited, because the specific circumstances of that moment, that market, that opportunity will never return in exactly the same form again. Financial freedom belongs to those who have made peace with the fact that fear will always be present in some form, and who have decided to act with clear thinking despite its presence, rather than waiting for its complete disappearance. The Stoic path teaches that we cannot always control what we feel, but we can absolutely control what we do next, regardless of that feeling. The next bold step available to you right now, whether it is opening that investment account you have delayed for months, launching the product you have been quietly refining without ever releasing, or finally having the difficult conversation about leaving a role that no longer serves your growth, is waiting for a decision that only you can make. Fear will offer its usual disguise of caution and further delay. Recognize that disguise clearly, weigh the realistic cost of continued inaction honestly, and take the next step forward anyway, trusting that courage, much like every other skill in this book, grows stronger each time it is genuinely practiced. Chapter 8. Automate your systems, so money keeps flowing without constant effort. A river does not need to be pushed forward by hand every single day to keep flowing toward the sea. It flows because the landscape itself, shaped once through slow geological forces, now guides the water automatically along a path that requires no ongoing effort to maintain. This is precisely the relationship you want to build with your income. Right now, much of what you earn likely requires your constant, direct attention, your hands on the wheel every single day, your presence required to keep the movement going. The goal of this chapter is to help you reshape the landscape of your financial life so that money continues flowing along channels you built once, without needing your daily hand to guide every drop of it forward. Automation, in the context of building lasting income, means designing systems that continue operating correctly without requiring your constant decision-making or direct involvement. This applies to two very different but equally important areas of your financial life. The first is automating the way money moves once it arrives, ensuring it flows towards savings, investments, and important obligations without requiring you to make a fresh decision every single time a paycheck lands in your account. The second is automating the operations of any income-producing asset you have built, whether that is a product, a service, or an investment, so that it continues functioning and generating value without requiring your hands on every single transaction that occurs. Let us begin with the first type, because it is the simplest to implement and yet remains skipped by an enormous number of people who genuinely intend to save and invest consistently, but rely on willpower alone to make it happen. Willpower, as discussed earlier in this book, weakens under stress, fatigue, and the countless small temptations that fill an ordinary week. If saving money requires you to consciously decide, every single payday, to transfer a portion into investments rather than spending it, you are relying on a resource that will eventually fail you during a difficult month. The solution is to remove the decision entirely by setting up automatic transfers that move a fixed percentage of your income into savings and investment accounts the moment your paycheck arrives, before you ever have the chance to spend it on something else. This single system, set up once and then left alone, accomplishes more for your long-term wealth than years of well-intentioned but inconsistent manual effort ever could. The same principle applies to paying down debt, if debt is currently part of your financial picture. Setting up automatic payments that exceed the minimum required amount, calculated once and then left running in the background, ensures steady progress toward becoming debt-free without requiring you to remember or decide anew each month. Many people intend to pay extra toward their debt whenever they have a good month financially, yet good months arrive unpredictably, and the extra payment often gets forgotten or redirected towards something else entirely. Automating this process removes that uncertainty completely, turning a good intention into a guaranteed outcome. Now let us turn to the second, more advanced form of automation, which involves the actual assets and income streams you have built following the earlier chapters of this book. If you have created a digital product, automation means setting up a system where a customer can discover it, purchase it, and receive it without requiring your personal involvement in that specific transaction. This typically involves a simple website or platform that handles payment processing and delivery automatically, allowing sales to occur at any hour of the day or night, across any time zone, without you needing to be awake, available, or even aware that the transaction is happening in that exact moment. The initial effort of setting up this system requires focus and some technical learning, but once built correctly, it continues operating with only occasional maintenance required from you. If your income stream involves a service business, automation might look different, but follows the same underlying principle. Instead of personally scheduling every client, answering every basic question, and processing every payment by hand, systems can be built that handle scheduling automatically through simple booking tools, answer frequently asked questions through a clearly written page that clients can reference before ever needing to contact you directly, and process payments without requiring you to manually invoice each person individually. Each of these small automations frees a portion of your time and mental energy that was previously consumed by repetitive tasks that did not actually require your unique judgment or skill to complete. A crucial mindset shift here involves recognizing the difference between tasks that genuinely require your personal judgment and tasks that simply require consistency and repetition. Many people who build something successful fall into the trap of believing they must personally handle every single aspect of it forever, out of a sense of responsibility or a fear that anything automated will somehow be lower in quality. This belief, while understandable, quietly recreates the exact same trap of trading time for money that you have been working to escape throughout this entire book. Your judgment and expertise are valuable and should remain involved in decisions that genuinely require them, such as the overall direction of your product, the quality of what you create, and the relationships with your most important clients or customers. Repetitive tasks that follow the same pattern every time, however, are excellent candidates for automation, freeing your judgment to focus where it truly matters. Begin this process by conducting an honest inventory of everything currently required to keep your income flowing, whether that income comes from investments, products, or services. Write down every single task involved, no matter how small, from responding to basic customer questions to physically transferring money between accounts. For each task on this list, ask a simple question. Does this specific task require my personal judgment, or does it simply require consistency and could therefore be handled by a system, a tool, or a set of clear instructions given to someone else? Tasks that fall into the second category are your immediate candidates for automation, and addressing even a few of them will free noticeable amounts of time and mental space almost immediately. Building these systems requires patience during the setup phase, much like everything else discussed throughout this book. The first time you build an automated system, whether it is a simple savings transfer or a complete product delivery process, it will take longer and require more careful thought than simply doing the task manually one more time. This upfront investment of effort is precisely what pays dividends later, because a system built once with care continues operating correctly for months and years afterward, while manual effort must be repeated endlessly, consuming your time and energy again and again, without ever building towards something larger than the immediate task itself. The river that flows without needing to be pushed did not become that way by accident. It was shaped by forces working consistently over time until the landscape itself simply supported the natural movement of water without further intervention. Your financial systems can be shaped the same way, not through a single dramatic effort, but through the patient construction of automated processes that handle your savings, your investments, your products and your services correctly and consistently, freeing you to direct your remaining time and energy toward the judgment, creativity, and relationships that only you can provide, while the money you have already worked hard to build continues flowing steadily forward on its own. Chapter 9. Protect your wealth by learning to avoid costly money mistakes. A castle is not built simply by stacking stones as high as possible. A castle is built with walls, a moat, watchtowers and guards, because the builders understood a truth that many wealth builders forget entirely. Building something valuable and protecting something valuable are two completely different skills, and mastering one does not automatically grant you mastery of the other. You can spend years working diligently to build assets, streams of income, and careful investments, only to lose a significant portion of it in a single moment of carelessness, a single bad decision made in a moment of overconfidence or fear. This chapter is not about building more. It is about protecting what you have already worked so hard to create. The first costly mistake that quietly destroys wealth for otherwise disciplined people is lifestyle inflation, a term that describes the tendency for spending to rise automatically alongside income, consuming every increase before it ever has a chance to build lasting security. This mistake is dangerous precisely because it feels reasonable in the moment. You earned more, so surely you deserve a nicer car, a larger home, more frequent conveniences that make life easier. None of these desires are inherently wrong, but when every single increase in income is immediately absorbed by an increase in spending, the gap between what you earn and what you keep never widens, no matter how successful you become on paper. Protecting your wealth means deciding in advance, before the next raise or windfall arrives, what percentage of any increase will go directly towards savings and investment, before your lifestyle is ever given the chance to expand and claim it first. The second costly mistake involves chasing returns that sound too good to be reasonable, a trap that has caught intelligent, careful people throughout history, not just the naive or inexperienced. When someone promises unusually high returns with little or no risk, alarm bells should sound immediately, no matter how convincing the person delivering that promise appears to be, no matter how many others seem to be involved and vouching for its legitimacy. Legitimate investments carry legitimate risk, and returns that dramatically exceed normal market performance almost always indicate either extreme risk that is being hidden from you or outright fraud designed to separate you from your money before disappearing. Protecting your wealth means developing the discipline to walk away from opportunities that sound exciting and extraordinary, understanding that steady, unremarkable growth over many years will almost always outperform the dramatic promises that turn out to be empty. The third costly mistake is failing to build a safety reserve before pursuing more ambitious financial goals, leaving yourself without any buffer when unexpected expenses inevitably arrive. Life does not proceed according to a tidy plan. Cars break down, health emergencies occur, jobs are sometimes lost without warning, and without a reserve of easily accessible savings set aside specifically for these moments, people are often forced into damaging decisions during a crisis, such as withdrawing from long-term investments at exactly the wrong moment or taking on high-interest debt simply to survive an emergency. Building a reserve covering several months of essential expenses, kept in a safe and accessible place, rather than invested in anything risky, is not a glamorous use of money, but it is precisely what allows the rest of your financial plan to remain untouched and intact when life inevitably throws its unexpected challenges your way. The fourth costly mistake worth examining closely is making major financial decisions while in an intense emotional state, whether that emotion is fear, excitement, grief, or anger. Markets fall sharply and panic spreads, prompting people to sell investments at their lowest point out of sheer fear, permanently converting a temporary decline into a real, locked-in loss. Markets rise dramatically and excitement spreads, prompting people to invest far more than is wise into whatever is currently popular, often near the peak of that popularity, right before conditions shift. Grief following the loss of a loved one sometimes leads to hasty decisions about inheritance or property that would have been made differently with more time and clearer thinking. Protecting your wealth means building a personal rule that no significant financial decision will be made within the first few days of an intense emotional reaction, giving yourself time for the initial wave of feeling to pass before committing to anything permanent. The fifth mistake involves neglecting proper protection through insurance and legal structures, viewing these tools as unnecessary expenses rather than essential safeguards for everything you have built. Many people who have worked hard to accumulate assets fail to adequately protect those assets against the unpredictable events that could otherwise erase years of disciplined effort in a single incident. Appropriate insurance coverage for your health, your property, and your income protects you against catastrophic losses that would otherwise force you to liquidate investments or take on damaging debt. Basic legal structures, such as clearly documented ownership of assets and updated plans for how your wealth should be handled in the event of your death, ensure that everything you have built continues to serve the people you intend it for, rather than being lost to confusion, disputes, or unnecessary legal complications. The sixth mistake, subtle and often overlooked, is failing to review your financial situation regularly enough to catch small problems before they grow into larger ones. Automation, discussed in the previous chapter, handles many repetitive tasks effectively, but automation without any periodic review can allow mistakes to compound unnoticed. A forgotten subscription silently draining money each month, an investment that no longer matches your goals, a beneficiary designation that was never updated after a major life change. All of these small oversights can quietly undermine years of careful planning if left unexamined for too long. Setting aside time every few months, not to obsess over every detail but simply to review the overall picture with clear eyes, catches these issues while they remain small and easily corrected. Notice that protecting wealth, much like building it, relies far more on consistent, unremarkable discipline than on any single brilliant decision or clever strategy. The castle stands not because of one particularly strong stone, but because every wall, every gate, and every watchtower was built with the same careful attention, working together as a complete system of protection. Your financial life deserves this same complete attention. Build your reserve before chasing bigger goals. Question anything that promises extraordinary returns without corresponding risk. Wait through emotional storms before making permanent decisions. Protect what you have built through proper insurance and clear legal planning. Review your situation regularly, rather than assuming everything remains fine simply because you built it correctly once. Wealth that is built without being protected is wealth that remains perpetually vulnerable, no matter how impressive it may look in any single moment. And the quiet, consistent work of protection deserves exactly the same respect and discipline you have already learned to apply to the quiet, consistent work of building. Chapter 10. Commit to daily growth that compounds into infinite income forever. We have traveled a long distance together through these pages, and if you have absorbed even a portion of what has been shared, you already understand something that most people never come to realize in their entire lives. Wealth is not an event. It is not a single lucky break, a single winning investment, or a single brilliant idea that arrives fully formed and changes everything overnight. Wealth, the kind that lasts, the kind that pays you for the rest of your life and beyond, is the quiet result of small actions repeated so consistently that their combined effect eventually becomes impossible to ignore. This final chapter exists to remind you of one simple truth, the truth that holds every previous chapter together like a single thread running through all of them. None of this works without daily commitment, and daily commitment, sustained long enough, works better than almost anything else available to you. Think back to everything we have covered, the mindset shift that separates disposable effort from effort that builds something lasting, the discipline of building your first asset quietly while a job still funds your daily life, the unglamorous work of mastering your habits with money before ever expecting wealth to grow, the patient construction of multiple income streams so that no single disruption can take everything from you, the transformation of your own knowledge into products that continue serving people long after the effort of creating them has ended, the steady, unremarkable consistency of small investments that eventually reveal their power only after years of patient waiting, the courage required to act despite fear that will never fully disappear, the systems built once that continue running without your constant hand guiding every step, the protection of what you have built through discipline that matches the discipline used to build it in the first place. Every single one of these principles shares the same hidden requirement beneath the surface. They all depend entirely on what you choose to do today, and then again tomorrow, and then again the day after that, for months and years that stretch far beyond what feels exciting or immediately rewarding. This is where most people, if we are honest, quietly fail, not because the information was hidden from them, but because daily consistency is far less glamorous than the idea of financial freedom that inspired them to begin in the first place. It is easy to feel motivated while reading a book like this one, while imagining the future life these principles could create. It is much harder to feel that same motivation on an ordinary Tuesday evening, exhausted from work, when the choice is between continuing to build the asset you started or simply resting in front of a screen instead. The difference between those who eventually achieve lasting financial freedom and those who remain forever hoping for it rarely comes down to talent, intelligence, or even opportunity. It comes down almost entirely to what they choose on those ordinary, unremarkable evenings when nobody is watching and no reward is immediately visible. Understand deeply that compounding, the very principle that has quietly appeared throughout every chapter of this book, does not only apply to money sitting in an investment account. Compounding applies to you, to your skills, your discipline, your knowledge, and your character. In exactly the same way it applies to financial returns. Every day you choose to learn something new related to your goals. Every day you choose to resist an impulsive purchase. Every day you choose to work on your asset instead of postponing it. You are making a deposit into a version of yourself that grows stronger and more capable over time. This personal compounding, invisible in any single day, becomes the foundation upon which all financial compounding eventually rests, because it is impossible to build lasting wealth without first building the daily habits and character required to sustain it. Consider what your life will look like 5 years from this exact moment if you commit fully to this daily practice, compared to what it will look like if you simply close this book and continue exactly as before. 5 years is not a long time in the context of an entire life, yet it is more than enough time for consistent daily action to produce results that feel almost unrecognizable compared to where you started. The person who commits to building something small every single day, who protects their habits with the same seriousness they protect their physical health, who treats their financial education as an ongoing practice rather than a topic they studied once and set aside, will look back in 5 years at a completely different life than the person who read inspiring words and then let daily life quietly absorb their good intentions without ever converting them into consistent action. Daily growth does not require heroic effort, and this is perhaps the most important reassurance to close this book with. You do not need to transform your entire life overnight, quit your job tomorrow, or radically restructure everything you currently do. What is required is far simpler and, in many ways, far more sustainable than any dramatic transformation could ever be. It requires choosing, each day, one small action that moves you closer to the life described throughout this book. It might be 30 minutes spent building your product. It might be reviewing your spending honestly instead of avoiding the numbers out of fear. It might simply be resisting a purchase that would have widened the gap between your income and your spending in the wrong direction. These actions, small and unremarkable in isolation, become the very rice grains doubling across the chessboard discussed earlier in this book, appearing insignificant for a long stretch of time, before eventually producing results that feel almost impossible to believe. The Stoic philosophers understood something that remains just as true today as it was thousands of years ago. They taught that a good life is built not through occasional dramatic gestures, but through the daily practice of virtue, applied consistently regardless of circumstance, regardless of mood, regardless of whether anyone else notices the effort being made. Financial freedom, viewed through this same lens, is simply virtue applied specifically to how you build, protect, and grow your resources over time. It is discipline practiced daily rather than motivation summoned occasionally. It is patience trusted consistently rather than urgency demanded impatiently. It is the quiet, repeated choice to act in alignment with the future you want, even on the days when that future feels distant and uncertain. You now hold within you everything discussed throughout this book, and the only remaining variable is what you choose to do with it starting today. Not next month, not after the next milestone arrives, not once conditions finally feel perfect, because that moment of perfect readiness, as we discussed earlier, rarely arrives before action is taken rather than after. Begin today in whatever small way is available to you right now, and then begin again tomorrow, and continue beginning again each day after that, trusting that these small, consistent beginnings, compounded quietly over months and years, are precisely how ordinary effort transforms into something that continues paying you for the rest of your life. This is the infinite income formula in its simplest and truest form, not a single formula at all, but a daily decision, repeated faithfully, until the results speak for themselves far louder than any words ever could.